Hi guys, I wanted to show you what's going on inside this drum feed gearbox for an Amco brake lathe. Let me just whip this apart real quick here. Okay. Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to rebuild an Amco drum feed gearbox. There's no magic beans in there. It's all basic. It's basically a CVT transmission. You have the input shaft, which goes through there. Has a bearing, runs over there. Here's your first gear. It needs to slide on and match up with that notch. Then there's the second clutch assembly piece. That goes there. That goes there. That goes there. That goes there. There's a brass button in there. That's for locks it down with this little set screw thing. Grub screw, set screw, depending on where you're from. And that's how the input shaft goes together. It's a whole different story putting it together inside the gearbox. So that's that. In order to make everything slide on there, if you've got a shaft with grooves on it, I put it on the lathe and bevel those edges with a file and sand it down so it's nice and smooth and gets all the age, wear, and tear. You get little grooves on there, and those grooves, because when you go to assemble it, everything's got to slide on like by your fingertips. You're gonna be basically, when you go to assemble this, you're gonna have this all assembled in there, and you're gonna have to reach in there and push both of these together down onto there. See that pin right there? That's all got to come on there like this. You're gonna have to reach in and go like that and sandwich this gear in there. All right, so dressing this shaft is really important. If you get a new shaft and a new gear and they won't fit, you have to make them fit before you assemble them, because there's no pounding this thing together. It's got to go together like click, click, click. Then there's the next piece in this party, which goes right here. There's the stopper for it. Just stop it in that direction, and it stops up there in that direction. That goes in there like that. And that's going to rock what I call, for explanation purposes, the divider piece. That's going to go on there like that. That's going to go on there like that. And what's going to happen is this gear is driven by this gear, like that. Right? So this, let me see if I can show you. This spins that, right? And then this, depending on where it is engaged in between these two gears, this goes like that, right? And that's going to sit there. And then this gear is going to sit there on that shaft. And depending on how far this is rotated into there is how much it's going to take away from this shaft's RPM. This doesn't add any speed to it, it only reduces the output. This over here is the output gear that's going to drive that. Okay, so this thing just rocks on that pivot right there, and it pivots in that piece of the housing right there. This little conical thingy right here, let me see if you can focus on it. That little bad boy goes right there. And it's supposed to spin. That's going to go into this shaft, which is right there, and that's going to adjust this in or out. That's connected onto that, right? So when you're twisting this thing, you're basically just moving this in and out of there to adjust the speed. Okay, then we have this part. This is the output, the feed screw that's actually going to do the driving. It has a Woodruff key over here that likes to cause issues. When you shift it in and out of gear, you're locked in gear, you're out of gear, right? So that shift lever operates this foot, which rides here, and clicks this in and out of gear. So the rest of the transmission is in operation whenever the machine is on and spinning. This is driving, all of this is driving. The only thing that's going in and out of gear is this on the output shaft. So the basics of what's going on is you have a input shaft that has two gears on it. The first one, driven off of that pin, is your primary ratio. Then this gear is run in between like that, and it subtracts from the output RPM. So however fast this is spinning, that's how much it's taking away from the output speed, because this is dividing to here. So this minus this ends up with this ratio, and that's where you get your continuously variable ratio, is depending on how far this gear slides into these two. So out here, this thing's booking. Way in there, it's hardly turning at all. So that's how the actual mechanism works. It is a CVT transmission, but it only works in reduction. It does not do any additional RPM. The maximum it could spin would be the same speed as the input shaft. Okay, so let's get busy here. When I'm going to install this, I got to put this bad boy together. I'm going to do this without any grease so that everybody can see what's going on. Usually I do it in an actual fixture that I have, but I'm pretty good at this. I got this down. All of this gets like gobs of grease. Make sure that that's greased. You make sure that every shaft, every portion is greased. Sometimes I'll just dunk them in a bucket of grease and pull them out and assemble them all greasy. But for showing you guys how to do this, if I put as much grease as I put on it, you wouldn't be able to see anything except for a big ball of grease. When I put these together, it's all covered in goo. That part drops in there like that. I'm just going to do this so I can show you how this goes. So then this piece is going to have to come down here and screw onto that and make the adjustment. Now when I'm happy with that, that's all good. Then I can put the snap ring here, push this that way, and put that on there. Now the way this gets centered or clocked or calibrated, depending on how you want to call it, you basically figure out where the middle of this is. Right? And then you put this on about the middle at like 10 and lock that down, because it has a lockout pin right there to keep you from over rotating it. Okay, so see what we got going here. We have this shaft is operating this gear cluster by that little foot right there. It just drops in like that. Okay, so that covers that part. Then we have this. This is your shifter shaft. I can't tell you how many times I forgot to put this rod on it. It goes like that, it goes down, and the woodruff key goes in and you put the foot. I'm not going to do it with the shaft on it because I'm just showing you how to put the gearbox together. But don't forget that shaft. You have to have that. It's not an optional piece of equipment. We got this woodruff key. Drops in here. You have to make sure that it's a little bit canted so that when this foot goes on, it actually goes on. Mind you, all this gets done covered in grease, so it's kind of a pain. Then it goes all the way up to that shoulder so that this doesn't have any clearance. All this gets done covered in grease. All of this gets greased madly. Now we got this part. Okay. This shaft drops in there. Whoops. You can't let that fall off of there like I just did. Usually that's not a problem because it's covered in grease. Now when I put this together, it's hard to see it. There's a little section where you can wobble it, and that's where you get the gear in. Okay. So that's that part. That's what should be going on there. Okay. Then there's a paper washer that goes there. You might need 2 of these to adjust the end play between this gear and this gear on the outer cover. If the gear goes like clunk, 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 you need an extra paper washer in there. If there is no paper washer, you need to put one in there. There has to be at least one. Okay, so that part goes in, and this part drops in. Then this part goes in. This part can be kind of tricky. That part goes in. That goes there. Okay, so that's the basics on that. Now when it comes time to put this other part together, we're going to have to do, this gear needs to land here like that. See that? On that side of that gear and on that side of that gear. Then this lands on this side of that gear, sandwiching the two there. I'm going to put this in a vise to show you this last part. This is the part that kicks everybody's butt. Oops. Forgot the snap ring. Okay, when it's all assembled, there's going to be some fine tuning that goes on, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adjusting the clocking of this dial to the gearbox. There's nothing really inside for you to do once you have it assembled. Make sure it shifts right. We're happy with all that. Now, when it comes to putting this thing together, this thing gets dropped in there, and you try and put that notch right on the very top. Then you stick your shaft in there with the drive pin right on the very top. Then you finagle your whole gear stack. You make sure to get all the gears lined up like they're supposed to be. And then you're going to gently carriage hold that whole setup like that with your fingers so that you can wiggle them gears and make them match up and do this. I can't believe it went that easy on the first try. This goes this way. It's still loose. This isn't spring loaded. The other one is back there and engaged. The shaft is all the way in and it dropped right in. That almost never happens. It only happens for me because everything on this has been dressed so that it all slides together perfectly. So now we have to put this clutch ring thing over here that puts the spring pressure there. Then the cover goes on. You can't let this like rest. You have to hold it until you get this together, because that first gear will slide right off of that shaft. I need to hold this shaft and then tighten this bad boy. Now there's a, when you tighten that, there's that whole clutch spring assembly. There's like a, I don't know, 1/4 inch of preloading that spring that you have to compress. And then when you get the bearing tight, it's a very much a feel deal. So you want to make sure the cover's tight and everything. And you just want to be just tight. Okay. That goes on. The wave washer really should be a self-locking nut, because this thing isn't getting torqued. It's being used as an adjuster to adjust the tension on this bad boy. Of course, it's the other Allen wrench. little brass button that goes in there. Thumb screw locks it down. And then we can bench test it. Take a second to drop in. There you go. And that's it. Now, I just want to stress this. I've trained a lot of people to try. I've tried to teach a lot of people how to do this. Doesn't look that complicated or tricky when I do it, but I've done hundreds of them. My average for teaching people to do this is terrible. I've tried to teach a bunch of people and nobody's been able to do it successfully and consistently. I've yet to see anybody do one the first try and get it right. It's a pain in the butt. If you're really patient and really good with your hands and you're not left-handed, the tricky part, you need a dominant right hand to do it. I worked with one guy, he's left-handed. He's patient. He's got all the qualities. The only thing is he's left-handed and his right hand isn't good enough to get that gear to drop on there. Once that thing's all covered with grease like it has to be before you assemble it, it gets a lot more complicated than it was for me with the clean gearbox that's had everything dressed and polished and fiddled with so that it all fit really good. This went that perfect because I put a bunch of time into making everything go in easy. This shaft never goes in easy like that. Even if it's brand new, it doesn't slide in easy like that. This shaft doesn't go in easy. None of this goes in easy. It just looked easy because I dressed everything on there, the shafts, all of it. Even with all of that stuff being perfect, if you're not really coordinated, if you can't work blind because you're not going to be able to watch what you're doing, you're going to have to picture it in your head, because if you looked, all you would see would be a giant ball of grease with some gears in it. There's nothing for you to really see that's going to help you other than looking in through this side to examine where the pin and that first gear lines up. So hopefully I've gotten rid of all of the magic beans that are in there. The thing is, this gearbox, if you want to rebuild one of these things yourself or repair it one of yourselves, you need to know what you're getting into. You need to be prepared mentally for it to be a challenge, that it's gonna be a pain in the ass, because these things they didn't break until they had a ton of mileage on them. It's very rare to see a new one break. Pretty much every time you see one of them that's screwed up, it's been around for 20 or 30 years. Some of these gearboxes I take apart and the grease is actually turned into like wood chips inside there. And that's actually one of the main ways that they fail. I see this a lot with machines out in the desert where nobody really abused the machine. Just eventually the grease got so dry, it was like wood chips. And everything was stuck. You couldn't actually get anything to work like it was supposed to because the grease had literally weeped out all of the oils and turned into like a plastic substance. Getting that apart and cleaning it is a huge pain in the ass. If you have a machine that's been out in the desert for 20 or 30 years, cleaning that gearbox is going to be like a multi-day event, because literally all the oil, all the grease in there will be just like plastic melted on the inside of everything. It's pretty wild. Anyway, I hope that helps anybody out with that stuff. If you have any questions about how to do this stuff, probably you might want to consider talking to somebody who's already done it. Because really, there's not, if you couldn't do it with the information you got out of this video, the parts are another story. Anyway, thanks for, I hope this helps everybody. If you're thinking about fixing it and it's above your, something you're not really interested in doing, call me, I'll take care of it. I actually know how to do this shit. Thanks for your time, guys.